if you want to go to a church that will prepare you for heaven, there's nothing like going to a church that's talked about so much in Revelation. In Revelation, it mentions altar, it mentions martyrs under the altar, it mentions liturgical garments, people clothed in white, it mentions a throne, it mentions all these things, the tabernacle, which is the Blessed Mother, because after it mentions the tabernacle, it talks about a woman who's clothed with the sun and the moon at her feet. These are all the elements that are talked about in heaven in the vision that John had. And if you want to go to a church that reflects that exact same vision, that's the Catholic Church at the Mass. When you go to the Mass, you'll see an altar, you'll see a throne for the priest to sit in, you'll see maybe a statuette of Virgin Mary, you'll see all these things in heaven reflecting what's going on in heaven. As well, you see and participate in the sacrifice of Christ, a representation, a reenactment of the crucifix of Christ on the altar with the separation of his blood and his body. This represents the death of Christ on the cross. This is not Christ dying again. This is a reenactment of what already happened. Just as the Old Testament sacrifices were pointing to Christ, the Eucharist and the sacrifice on the altar points back to Christ. Everything is pointed back to Christ. And I was listening to the priest today, and so many times the word Jesus coming out of his mouth, more than any other pastor or I listened to as a Protestant. Every other word out of this priest's mouth was the word Jesus, the one we love so much and adore so much. People think that Mary gets in the way. Mary can never get in the way of her son. She always brings people to her son, and that's why I'm a Catholic, because I know the scripture comes alive with much more power and historical relevance when we understand, for example, that when Jesus said to Peter, "Thou art the rock, and on this rock I'll build my church," it's a historical statement that changed history. People want to discount it as if it's nothing, and Jesus was only talking about himself. But actually, the popes on the planet have always been a part in the changing of history and bringing forth the scripture. And 325 with Pope Dionysius. These are all the facts that surround the truth and the power and the relevance of the Catholic Church that brings the Bible more alive than any other church in the earth.